So let's dive into the reasoning behind this executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. At its core, this move emphasizes federalism. That's the idea that states and local governments should have more autonomy. The claim is centralized federal oversight stifles creativity and the ability to address specific local needs. By decentralizing, the hope is that communities will tailor education to their demographics.
Exactly. It's about cutting red tape, plain and simple. Federal bureaucracy, in theory, sounds nice, but in practice, it's like dragging a 200-pound ruck through the mud. States are bogged down with, mandates and useless paperwork. This order clears the mud, lets local leaders call their own shots.
But Duke, critics say this could lead to, disparities, right? Wealthier states, for example, might benefit from this, while poorer states could fall further behind. I mean, how do we ensure that every child, no matter their zip code, gets the same shot at quality education?
Well, let's be real here. Federal oversight hasn't exactly solved those disparities either, yeah? Look at how bloated the Department of Education's been for decades, and yet failing schools are still, failing. You gotta start somewhere. Local folks know what their community needs better than a bureaucrat in D.C. ever will.
I get that local solutions sound good on paper, but oh wait, did you happen to see the statistics? There's evidence suggesting that decentralization can spark innovation in curriculum development and testing. I saw reports on states running successful pilot programs with minimal federal input.
Yep, and that's the point. When Washington gets out of the way, you see creativity flourish. But here's a rhetorical for you. If we keep holding on to this top-down system that straitjackets states, how do you expect anything to change?
But doesn't letting go carry risks, Duke? Like, what if some states just don't have the capacity to manage these new responsibilities? The administrative challenges alone could be overwhelming.
Hey, look, I'm not saying this will be smooth sailing. Not every operation runs perfectly on day one. But the military taught me something. Adapt and overcome. States will figure out ways to manage. Besides, maybe it's time communities stepped up and took accountability for their education systems. Local control isn't just an idea, it's a solution.
And it's clear that ideology plays a huge role. The push for smaller government, fewer federal strings. That's
exactly it.
It appeals to a broader conservative base, no doubt. But I think we need to ask, what about those who value federal protections in cases like standardized goals or even civil rights in education? How do we balance deregulation with maintaining some level of fairness?
Fairness or control? That's the real question, isn't it?
Fairness or control? You're right, Duke, that's the big question. But I came across some examples that might strike a balance. Take Florida, for instance. Their funding model has been designed to encourage local schools to think outside the box. They're adjusting curriculums to fit specific community needs, like increasing STEM resources in underserved areas. Isn't that the kind of innovation you were talking about?
Absolutely. Florida's a great example. They're proving that states can get creative and actually improve outcomes when D.C. isn't breathing down their necks. Adapt and overcome, like I said.
But here's the thing. Some communities have gone even further, and it's so inspiring. Imagine a rural town where teachers and parents come together to solve a decades-old problem, literacy gaps. That's what happened in a small district out west. They pooled local resources and built this mentorship program. And without federal red tape, bam, reading scores shot up in just 2 years.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Local folks stepping up. It's like a platoon working together toward the mission. No need for outside interference. Just laser-focused on what needs to get done.
But Duke, not everywhere is Florida or this miracle town. Innovation is great, but it still needs a strong support system. If states are managing everything on their own, how do we ensure coordination without lapsing into disarray?
Well, support doesn't have to mean meddling. Look, block grants give states the funds. From there, maybe it's about encouraging partnerships between districts, like how the military coordinates units across the globe, local autonomy, but with shared goals. Simple concept, right?
Fair point, but execution matters. For instance, when local leaders are empowered, they're closer to identifying what students need most. Think tailored curriculums, culturally relevant lessons, maybe even courses aligning with emerging industries. So when it works, it's like a fresh start, but only if communities have the resources to make it happen.
Right, and I'd argue that toughening up, taking control, will, force those communities to rally. Innovation thrives where folks own their challenges, not where some federal office tries to, micromanage.
It's it's an empowering vision, I'll admit. And yet I wonder, does it assume too much? Like what guarantees do we have that innovation won't just favor the communities with, the best starting point? All right, Duke, you make a strong case for how communities can rise to the challenge, but let's talk about the tough stuff. What about the risks? Decentralization could widen the gap between the haves and have-nots. Sure, some states may innovate and flourish, but what happens to places like Mississippi or New Mexico, where resources are already stretched thin?
Look, I won't sugarcoat it. There's no easy playbook. But isn't the bigger question this? Do we keep letting federal solutions fail these states, or give local leaders a shot to step up? I mean, the current system hasn't exactly leveled the playing field either.
Okay, but without federal oversight, how do we ensure baseline standards? Imagine one state ditching science education because it's not a priority, or another inflating grades just to boost numbers. Without consistent benchmarks, won't we see some kids left behind?
Standards don't have to come from D.C., Anjali. Communities know what their kids need to succeed. And look, different states, different missions. That's how you adapt to challenges instead of forcing one-size-fits-all solutions. Failure in one area? They adjust, plain and simple.
But isn't there a danger that the most vulnerable, low-income students, marginalized groups, get overlooked in the process? Federal guidelines often ensure those safeguards, right? Without them, imagine the patchwork of laws and policies. It's daunting.
Yeah, maybe. But federal mandates don't guarantee success either. And hey, local systems tend to respond faster. Say a school board knows its area struggles with, math scores. They're closer to the problem. They'll act faster. DC? That's like turning a battleship. It takes years to steer.
Maybe faster responses. But does that scale, Duke? Think about racial or socioeconomic divides. Localized power without oversight could widen those gaps even more. And legally, there's this critical aspect of civil rights enforcement under federal jurisdiction.
Yeah, but laws don't vanish overnight. States still gotta follow the Constitution. And besides, if federal oversight really fixed inequality by now, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Fair, but let's not lose sight of the stakes here. Education shapes futures, our workforce, our democracy. Maybe federal involvement isn't perfect, but, dismantling it all at once? It could create chaos before those local solutions even have time to work.
And what's the alternative? Anjali, innovation thrives under pressure. Chaos? Sure, maybe at first. But look, no battle plan survives first contact. You adapt, you push through. And if states see themselves falling behind, they're going to tackle the issue head on. That's accountability.
Accountability. It's a strong word. But will it push the right states into action? That's the question. Can we afford to gamble with inequities while hoping innovation catches up?
Well, here's the deal. If we keep waiting for perfect conditions, nothing's ever going to change. Sometimes you gotta cut the cord and see who steps up. Adapt and overcome ain't just military lingo, it's life.
Adapt and overcome. It's a compelling argument, I'll admit. But Duke, I guess what this all comes down to is faith. Faith that state and local leaders will do the right thing. Faith that we can handle the risks of dismantling something so fundamental. Maybe it's worth the gamble to some, but to others, those risks are, just too great.
And that's the heart of it, huh? Disagreeing on how much risk is acceptable to fix a system that's been failing for years.
Exactly. And maybe that's where we have to leave it. To our listeners, what do you think? Is the potential for innovation worth the risk of inequity, or does the gamble cost too much?
Sound off, folks. This mission isn't over yet.
And on that note, we're wrapping up today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to this spirited debate. We both appreciate you taking the time to listen, even if you're shaking your head at us right now.
Or nodding along. You never know.
True. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious. Take care, everyone.